March 76, President Gerald Ford announced the biggest immunization program in history.
This virus was the cause of a pandemic in 1918 and 1919 that resulted in over 500,000 deaths in the United States.
Ford's intention was to vaccinate every man, woman, and child in the United States. Vaccine was rushed into production and imported in great quantities. The cost was to be about $135 million. And the first batch of vaccine was delivered on November 1st. The first public swine flu clinic opened 3 weeks later. From the beginning, the program was criticized for being hastily implemented and unnecessary. But over 50 million people in North America were inoculated at a cost of $100 million before investigators discovered an apparent increase in a rare paralytic disorder called Guillain-Barré syndrome among the recently vaccinated. This and the fact that the epidemic failed to materialize led to a quick end to the vaccination program in December 1976.
Researchers and experts now fear that the failure of the swine flu epidemic to materialize in '76 will have detrimental effects on preparations for future pandemics. Dr. Arthur Silverstein was an advisor to the U.S. Senate Health Committee in 1976 and has written a book about the swine flu scare. Dr. Silverstein, you called your book about the experiences of '76 pure politics, impure science. Why is that the right image for those experiences?
I think it's the right image because whereas one didn't then and still doesn't know all that much about the science of influenza virus, one knows a fair amount about how politics works in Washington. And politics worked very smoothly, although the science did not in the '76 flu outbreak.
Now, let me say, I'm going to spend the first part of this presentation talking about swine flu, but I'm going to offer the caveat that I'm not a medical practitioner. So I would absolutely encourage not a single one of you to take anything that I say at face value. There is no need to, because during the course of the presentation, I'm going to explain the references, so you can go check this stuff out for yourself. And in my opinion, over the coming weeks, there has never been a time when it's been more important to educate yourself. Now, that little video was put together by a guy called Jody Lloyd in New Zealand. He lives in Christchurch, New Zealand. And he's a young guy. He performs under the name of Trillion. And I think, he has demonstrated that all around the world, people are starting to make the effort to educate themselves. And so they should, because we don't have to look too hard to see the first piece of a jigsaw that should give us some serious cause for concern. Because do you know who the architect was behind the 1976 swine flu outbreak? The architect was none other than Donald Rumsfeld. Isn't it amazing how often this guy crops up? And of course, his buddy, Cheney, is never far behind. And these guys have a political career that goes back sort of some 40-odd years. So these guys are extremely practiced in the art of manipulation. And Donald Rumsfeld dreamed up the swine flu scam in 1976 to provide a sort of wag the dog type scenario for President Gerald Ford, who was struggling in the primaries against his opponent, who was a guy who went by the name of George Herbert Walker Bush. So the idea was that it does appear that one person died of swine flu at Fort Dix. One person. And they used that as the basis with which to announce a swine flu pandemic. Ford signed off $135 million for the vaccine and started a program of mass inoculation. Unfortunately, or fortunately I should say, very quickly, it was identified that there were some pretty serious effects from the vaccination, up to and including death, which is the caveat that these drug makers offer on all of their commercials in the US. So, and as you heard on the video there, the other spin-off was a massive spread of Guillain-Barré syndrome, which was also known as infantile paralysis, and this affects the nervous system. So it was obviously not good PR, so it was very quickly buried. And, of course, actually, Ford didn't get re-elected. He was replaced by Jimmy Carter, who was